They're wrong uns, Victoria. Don't do it.
Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
Hey, James. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Glad to be getting underway after the few false starts we've had, trying to get our one-shot wonder podcast episode done.
Yes, unfortunately. I'm now on my fourth house of the last 6 months. I've done 3 moves in 6 months, and my new place is delightful, living with some very good friends, but the Wi-Fi connection is appalling. So I've had to vacate and take up recording somewhere else for Sunday. But James is a patient man, thank God, and I'm here, and we're working, we're underway, all is well.
And I just thought, particularly, some kind of dramatic irony that we're talking about these films that are one-take films or shot in one take. When you read the background stories behind them, there's often some retakes that happen, or they have to stop for a week and then they come back. So I feel like in the spirit of what we're discussing, it's all come together, Lily.
Okay, so let's dive right in. First of all, what is a one-take movie? Because I saw in the script that you had written, is it one take or one shot? And I was like, oh my God, I've got this horribly wrong. But then I was like, oh wait, no, everywhere I read, they always call it one take.
What we're talking about are one take or one shot films. These are films where it appears as if the entire film has been shot continuously with no cuts, with no camera stoppage, with no cuts to close-up. If the film was 90 minutes long, for 90 minutes, that camera was one continuous shot. And now why do I say one take or one shot? Because I think one-shot films are what most of these films are in, like Birdman, for example. It's a film which appears to have been shot in one take, but it isn't. It's multiple takes joined together invisibly. So it's been planned to be seamless so that you can't see the joint. It's creating the effect of one shot. However, one take is where they press record on the camera and what you see on screen happened for the next 90 minutes, 2 hours. So what we're discussing today, we've got both of those films. That's not an official thing, by the way. That's just my head saying, trying to get a distinction there.
No, but that's a very good point. Because, one take, when you really think about it, it sounds like you're saying, we got it all literally in this one take, when the reality is for almost all of these movies, actually, I think all of them, technically, we'll get into it. But for most of them, you're right. It's multiple takes, or at least a few takes, and then stitched together to appear as one long shot.
Yeah, and with advances in effects technology and the fact that people have made more and more of these films over the years, so there's tips and tricks you can use, so the joins are getting ever more seamless.
Yeah, I want to discuss why the hell we would even do this. Why is this something that filmmakers want to try? But I think before we get to that, let's contextualize our listeners in the history of the one-take movie, because it's quite interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, like, the one-take movie goes back to the dawn of cinema. Let's rewind the clock back to 1896,
Wow.
You're in France, you sit down, you're about to watch it, and oh my God, it's as if a train is approaching you and it's going to crash into you because there's a train approaching the station. So it's an urban myth that people freaked out a bit at the time in 1896. It's highly unlikely they did, but they made a version in 3D in the 1930s, and the 3D version, they reckon, is the one that would have really freaked people out. Anyway,
oh my God.
Yeah, but the point is that train arriving at the station, it's a one-take film. It's just one shot. It doesn't cut. And in fact, George Méliès, who is like somebody I take a lot of inspiration from, he was a magician making these short films. And if you watch any of the early Méliès films, like the first few years of his oeuvre, they're just one shot. That's what films were. They were one shot, a wide shot with a camera that didn't move, and the start and the end of that one shot was the entire short film. So that's what film was to begin with. So they were all one take. So that's its genesis there. I mean, but they were one takes due to necessity.
Yeah, because film had to invent the cut, and that was a way of creating time and space, right? But film had to come up with that, and in these early movies, they just hadn't got there yet. It was still too soon.
The film grammar hadn't been created. It was the very dawn of the art form. So essentially what they were doing, they were copying the closest analogue, which of course was theatre. So you just get one shot, people on a stage, you set everything around it, you build a set, that's it done. And then it also links back to the episode we talked about women editors, is that at this point, this is when women editors would have been staffing these jobs because their job was just to trim the start and the end and put the credits on. There was no creativity involved. So it was just like this manual labor, kind of quite like stitching things together job. Because as we've discussed on the other pod, that then developed into an art form. But right now, this is just a very simplistic art form.
Okay, but then the cut was invented, editing
Yeah.
was invented, and we fast forward to Alfred Hitchcock, who is arguably the king of editing and using cuts strategically to move his story
Yeah.
along and tell a story. But he decides to go for the one-take movie with Rope, his 1948 movie.
Now, this is, when we go back to the definition that I just kind of semi-created, this is definitely a one-shot movie, not a one-take movie, because the problem we have with trying to do a one-take film during the era of shooting on film, not digital, is that it was physically impossible. Because a magazine of film, maximum duration is 10 minutes, and then it runs out. The film runs out of the magazine, and so there's no way to shoot continuously for more than 10 minutes. You are locked into that. So that was a hard limit that Hitchcock had to work around with on Rope. And of course, there's all the classic techniques, you know. If you have somebody walking past the frame and they block the camera, then you can cut, because the image has gone black for that moment, and then you cut to your pickup shot where you've reset, you've restarted. And, you know, because this is 1950s, I mean, they're very well done, but you can definitely see the joins. They're not invisible to a modern audience, but they're as well done as they can be for the time.
But Alfred Hitchcock talked about how this was a gimmick, this was a marketing ploy that he used, and it was almost funny that he, as we said, because he is the kind of master of editing and cuts, it was kind of funny that he would decide to do this. But then, yeah, actually, because of all these quote unquote like hidden or slightly hidden cuts along the way, there still is the same, what you said, grammar of storytelling is still there in Rope. So it doesn't feel, I think that film feels somewhat less like a one-take movie than some of the others in a way. Like that pacing, I think, is still there. But I just found it interesting that he described it as a gimmick. I'm like, so why do it?
Movies are about show the audience something they haven't seen before. And I think Hitchcock's career was very much a kind of, you haven't seen this twist, or you haven't seen this, you haven't seen this premise before.
Yeah.
And he also did a 3D film that people forget about. It's not one of his better films, but it's Dial M for Murder. It was shot in 3D.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't think he was particularly fond of Rope. I was just reading the book of interviews he did with Francois Truffaut, and they discuss it quite a bit at length there. And he's not happy with it because, like you said, he's a director who's the master of the edit, and suddenly he didn't have you have to get all of your performance, everything. You have to get it like theatre. You have to get it there in front of the camera. You can't make anything in the edit because the edit, that's out of the question for you.
Yeah, it's kind of creativity in the moment that you're making the film, but then you can't employ any afterwards.
It's interesting because on one hand, what you're doing is you're completely disregarding a lot of cinematic tools. I mean, the edit, basically the ability to change time, to change performances, to do a lot of things that the edit gives you. You're forgoing all of those things, but what you are doing, you're leaning into something that's so peculiarly, uniquely cinematic, which is the fact that you can, especially when you go to a cinema where you're not stopping and starting the film, for 90 minutes or 2 hours, you are locked in a room, completely immersed in this world. And I was thinking as well that I think there's a certain reality that the one-take, one-shot film gives you, because we perceive our day-to-day reality in the present moment. We perceive it as one take, but when we think back on our lives, we perceive them as memory fragments where we cut around and we skip time. I just think subconsciously when we see edits in films, or even if we're not aware of it, we're essentially being put in the thought process of a memory, that this is a shifting fragment of memory. Whereas when we see a one-take film and we're not interrupting it, we are mimicking what it's like to be present.
Oh, James, I'm getting takes are coming back to me from university and doing a film course there, because there was a lot of psychoanalysis being employed in art history, and that's like a key part of like film, Freud, all these connections of how cuts and edits are very similar to dreams and memory, and there's all these associations there, right? And Hitchcock was like well into that. from what I remember.
Well into
You
it.
can tell I can barely remember anything.
He bloody loved it. He was mad for it. No, he was mad for it, yeah.
Okay, so there's a bit of a quiet lull. Are we saying? Well,
Yeah,
next in our timeline is Time Code from 2000.
which I was very excited to see at the time. I remember seeing it, I think in 2004. It was screening at Camera-Marge. It was a bit of a disappointment when I finally saw it because
Camera-Marge is the Polish film festival.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike Figgis he was demonstrating his fig rig and screening Time Code. He did a little presentation beforehand. And it's one of those things which is, it's a good, some of these one-take films are a bit more, they're an impressive exercise rather than a great film. And this was very...
Yes.
I mean, because, the fact is, in Time Code, the screen is split into 4 squares, and each one is a different one take, a genuine one take. So they've got 4 camera crews following 4 different actors. There's a few earthquakes throughout the film, so they had to coordinate everyone jiggling their cameras at the same time to give like the earthquake effect.
Wow, that's very impressive.
Yeah, it was a good, as far as what was pulled off, the film itself wasn't any great shakes. But,
Really?
But the thing about that was that it wasn't really what you call cinema quality. It was digital. It was 2000 digital video. Trust me, rough picture quality. So, but the fact that each digital image was reduced down to a smaller square helped. It kind of helped it. But you certainly wouldn't want to see a lavish production shot like that.
Okay, you sure? That's it's good to know.
good.
But impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. Or at least a good kind of idea of what we could do if digital technology improved. So, shooting film, you can only do 10 minutes. Digital technology up to about 2000 wasn't good enough quality, really, to do a film. So then we get in 2002, I remember at film school at the time, and so I read the American cinematographer article all about it, but Russian Ark came out, a Russian film. That was a one-take film, and it was because suddenly cameras had got high definition, so they were kind of good enough, I would say. I mean, I hate digital, but anyway, they were good enough. But the thing is, they couldn't record tapes longer than 45 minutes, so they had to get a company to design basically a backpack full of hard drives and batteries that was custom designed. And they had a runner whose job it was to wear the backpack and run alongside the camera with a cable going from it. Nowadays, you can get like 3 hours on some cards that you slot into the cameras that you shoot on. That's not a problem, but this is 20 odd years ago. So yeah, guy in a backpack running alongside.
Wow, that is amazing. Well,
Yeah.
I watched Russian Ark last night and a bit today as well, and I'm completely obsessed with it because it's just such a strange idea.
Yeah.
But I love it. So it's set in the Hermitage Art Museum in St. Petersburg, which was the palace of the Tsars, basically. And the film goes back in time. It kind of moves back and forth from between the 17th century and the early pre-revolutionary 20th century. There is a moment in like contemporary time towards the beginning, I swear. But we're not there very long. But it's incredible because you're walking through this museum you're kind of escorting this funny French guy, a Marquis apparently. A Marquis?
Marquis. Marquis, I think.
Whatever the singular is. And we have this voiceover from kind of the camera, as if the camera is a person walking. And he's going, "Where am I? I'm so confused." And that is the voice of the director, Alexander Sokurov. But he's not introduced as such. You don't know who this guy is. And both him and this French Marquis are both like, "Why are we here?" But they're just rolling with it. The French guy knows all about this art, but is very, very dismissive of Russia and Russian culture. And it's a very interesting film to watch now, particularly, I think, given the political situation we're in, because this is a film which is really celebrating Russia's cultural and historical ties to Europe. Like, this is an incredible collection of art from artists all over Europe. And we also have 3 orchestras playing it, sort of set in different time periods during the movie. This is music that's playing from, again, like all over Europe. And it shows this connection. And I just don't, this film would not be made right now.
No,
I'm sure of that.
Oh, absolutely not. But yeah, quite a fascinating kind of production history behind it, how they got the film kind of together. I remember at the time when I first heard about it, that they only had a limited window of opportunity. They had 4 hours to shoot the entire thing in. And they decided that they could have about 2 or 3 restarts up until a 20-minute point of each take that they did. So once he got past the 20-minute part, that was the point of no return. They did the first take, and the cameraman stopped after 10 minutes because he caught a really bad reflection of himself. Then he did the second one. I think the actor missed his cue, and this was all in the first 15. So they went on for their third, and this was their final. They had no choice now, so they had a third take, and that was the one that got used. But as soon as they started the take, came over on the walkie-talkie that for the final scene that's in a ballroom, one of the light balloons, because they've got helium balloons full of lights, right? One of them had deflated. And so they were going around, they had 90 minutes to fix it, and it wasn't until like 30 seconds before that it was all sorted. So the cameraman was going around thinking, we might get to that last shot and it's fucked because there'll be a helium balloon in the middle of the shot. So that was the circumstances under which this really beautiful, floaty film was made, was the cameraman thinking, oh, fuck, we could end up and the whole film's useless.
I think it adds to it. I think it adds to the film, the fact that you know that and you're kind of thinking about that as it's going on. I don't think it always works to be thinking about what is happening with the actual making of the film. But I think for this, because actually the plot is so light, really. Like, it's incredible. You're seeing these fantastical costumes, and there's this funny little interactions between the French guy and this voiceover is, there are moments of entertainment, but really it's pretty light, and it is just really showing this incredible museum as it would have been, and that's entertaining in its way. But like, what is really fun is just like seeing how everyone, because it's such a huge cast, there are thousands of people as they're walking through this huge museum, this palace, and so it makes it a very arresting watch. I really strongly recommend anyone to watch, because you're just constantly thinking about that and seeing how everyone is. And they're not perfect, there are moments, like I did see someone look at the camera at one point.
Yeah.
But that adds to it. I think it's fun.
Oh, absolutely. There's a certain energy because, sorry, I think just to make it very clear, this is a genuine one-take film. There are no invisible joins, although there's certainly lots of places where it could be an invisible join, which is a bit of a shame. There's certain moments where if you wanted to, you could have definitely joined it together. But anyway, that's by the by. But knowing that, and just knowing, holy shit, if one person goofs up here, the whole thing's got to reset, and especially when it's the final take. The adrenaline must be there. And as you're getting towards the end of the film, you're like, oh my God, the amount of anxiety, because the stakes are so high for the entire production. They're almost at the end. Come on.
This is insane. I don't know actually what is wrong with this director that he would want to put himself through this, but good for him.
I mean, the thing is, you know what? He made a film that 20 plus years later we're still talking about, and it certainly, it was a very significant film because it was the first time that a genuine, continuous one-take film was able to be made because of the advances in digital technology. And
then we kind of move on to more of the films where there are joins, but the joins are a bit better hidden, right? Like Birdman in 2014, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu's film.
Yeah. And then we've got 1917.
Oh, 1917, yeah. And let's not forget Son of Soul. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't, no.
Oh my God, it's incredible. I mean, it's heavy as fuck because it's a movie about Auschwitz, I believe, or one of the concentration camps. And it's filmed, you're basically over the protagonist's shoulder the whole time as he's going about his life there. But it's just, I think it works perfectly. This is like, I think there's something with, I didn't really love Birdman. Like, I saw the point.
I liked Birdman.
I think the problem with the one take movie is that it's very easy for it to drag. There's a reason we have cuts. It's to keep things moving, keep things pepping along. I felt like in Birdman, there are quite a few minutes where I'm like, all right, come on, let's get going.
Wait.
But with Son of Soul, I really felt like it works very, very well for what this film is about and what it's trying to convey. Like, it's so sort of intimate and urgent. I think it's brilliant. So if you want a heavy movie that's well made, Laszlo Neam's Son of Soul.
Okay. No, I hadn't even heard of that until to do this podcast, actually. So yeah, I need to look into that a bit. I mean, of course, the other one is 1917 that came out in 2020.
Which, again, I think it does drag a little bit. It's not as good as Dunkirk.
Oh, I completely agree with you. Oh, thank you for that one, Ali. But your pacing is baked in. You've got absolutely nothing to do about the pacing. They are all rehearsed for weeks and weeks, in months in some cases, just so that everybody's locked in. You can't just turn up on the day and discover this kind of one-take film. So everything's been rehearsed in advance, but then, of course, has it gone in front of an audience? Have people sat and watched it? Because there's nothing like watching your film with an audience for the first time to really get a sense of where things are dragging, because you're so engaged with the film as a director or, or the filmmaker involved with the project. You're getting more invested in the story, but when you see it with an audience, god damn it, things just seem to be much slower and draggier. If you show it to your audience and they're like still clocking out, well, tough,
Well, on that note, should we talk about Medusa Deluxe, which was kind of the inception of this whole episode? Well, actually, one of our listeners did recommend it. I remember this as a subject last year, it was a while ago.
Okay, thank you.
But James, you wanted to talk about Medusa Deluxe, which is another one-take movie. So tell me why you wanted to talk about it.
Well,
I had a hard time with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't know much about it, but I just thought it looked interesting because it was a one-take film set in the world of the UK hairstyling competition.
Professional hairdressing.
Professional hairdressing
competitions. Yeah. Which is, the premise is incredible. Sorry, Karen.
And shot by Robbie Ryan, who, of course, is Yorgos Lanthimos' cinematographer of choice. Yeah, they've done lots of projects together. So, and also, name drop, I did work for him for one day in my career. So I was his gaffer on a short film for one day. That's my claim to cinematic fame.
Okay, so I understand. You're emotionally invested in his career.
Yeah, he's an interesting cinematographer. Certainly, he's got a very clear style. So yeah, so for those reasons, I was like, worth a watch.
It's a hairdressing competition in which we don't really see the competition, but we land there and it becomes quickly apparent that someone has been killed. It's kind of like billed as a murder mystery, but to be honest, I feel like no one was really questioning it that much. I was a bit confused during the film because they were talking repeatedly about the fact that, this isn't really a spoiler because it's talked about very early on, that the murder victim had been scalped, obviously linking with hair. It's symbolic, Was it another competitor maybe? But I wasn't clear on how he'd actually been killed because that alone, I mean, it's ghastly to think about, but that alone wouldn't kill you. So it was all a little bit confusing what that was about. And yeah, but this is another Hidden Joins one-take movie, right?
Yes. So unlike Russian Ark, this is actually not actually one take. It looks like one continuous shot, but it's stitched together. I did a bit of research I have to say, though, it was pretty seamless. There's only one join where I could definitely say, hand on heart, that's a join. The rest of them...
really?
Yeah.
That's good. I obviously didn't see any.
It was probably some of the best invisible join work I've ever seen. Yeah, but
that's a great claim to fame.
Excellent
joinery there.
I mean, I do appreciate that because
that's the point.
I mean, when you look at Rope, where they had nothing to smooth things out, it was literally they could cut and they did their best. And here, you can just really go to town. And plus, they've just got better at planning all these things.
But this was smoothed over with CGI, correct? Like Birdman as well. Is that how they do it?
I mean, yes, but I like to be a bit careful with using the word CGI because CGI to me means like using 3D models, making characters and monsters and stuff and building buildings. Then there's other compositing where, yes, you're using computers, but you're just manipulating the 2D image like in Photoshop.
Okay, so what are you saying? That's less noble work than making characters? I feel like you're bringing on a value judgment. Both are important parts of, especially look in the one-take world. There is no higher art than smoothing those joins in Photoshop.
There certainly was no judgment call. It's just like me being an incredibly nerdy person who wants to go, well, CGI in my head, when you say the word CGI, it means 3D model stuff. And then, anyway, who cares? Computers, yes.
I have to say, so in a way, this film kind of stands out a little bit because it's less shaky than the others, right?
Well, yeah. Russian Ark was on Steadicam, but it was because it was a genuine one take that you can't. When we watched,
it felt a bit shaky at times.
Exactly, it's a bit rougher. But whereas because with Medusa Deluxe being shot in multiple parts, it meant that you did a 10-minute sustained run, and so if there was a problem on that 10 minutes, you could realistically go back reshoot them. You could also, for that 10-minute sequence, perhaps have the camera on a crane so it will be rock solid. But then when you do your transition to another scene, you then go back to handheld or Steadicam. But yeah, there's much more precision in the camera work in this. It was very noticeable.
That was the problem for me, was that it was so noticeable. I just kept thinking
Ah,
about what the camera was doing. I found it very distracting. And to be honest, I felt like the script wasn't so strong and the acting wasn't so strong. And so
these are the problems with a one take. If you've
yeah,
got, you can't cut around a performance.
yeah. And I feel like because of this one take thing, even though, like you said, they did it in parts, but I almost think that was maybe perhaps a bit why the actors were a bit, the delivery I felt at times was a bit stiff. I think honestly it might be partly because it was like a different way of filming than probably they're used to, assuming these are all like TV and film actors more than theatre. I just got the sense that they were all a bit more like highly strung almost. It just didn't feel as naturalistic. It did feel very stagey to me.
It did to me as well. What was interesting was noticing the differences between this and Russian Ark and Victoria that we're going to talk about. But I did feel that I don't think it helped. It was clear that everything had been ADR'd, so everybody's voice had been redubbed over. Very well done. But I think,
Oh,
yeah, and I think
yes.
that just adds a distancing effect. Now, interesting point to note when we talk about Victoria, they had 3 or 4 sound teams following all the different actors, and they actually boomed the whole film so that all of the dialogue, as much as possible, was the natural dialogue they spoke, which I think really helped. It's also performance as well, but there is just something a little bit artificial seeming about when you have dubbed voices.
Yeah, oh my God, that's exactly what it is. I couldn't really put my finger on it. I was like, why does this feel not quite right? There were a few moments where people were making quite impassioned monologues and it didn't feel quite right. And I think that was why, because,
That
no matter how good you are as an actor, it's never gonna be quite as natural as in the moment delivering those
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you remember when you replace the lines, you're in a recording booth with a nice microphone in a soundproof booth. When you're on a set or on a location, you've got all the echo and all the different, that just sells it as real in a way that the ADR doesn't. So not only is it the ADR that I think is a distancing effect, but I think you've also kind of, you touched upon something perhaps that you felt, I mean, it's very stylized, the film, but I just think that there was a point of view issue with this film because with Russian Ark, you are essentially a ghost character. You hear the voice of the character you never see. So it's like you are his point of view. You're that character and you are experiencing everything. This character's asking questions that you hear as voiceover. Victoria, that we're going to get to, it's all from Victoria's point of view. The camera never leaves Victoria. It's completely next to her all the time. But here with Medusa, the camera often follows one character or another. And that's just part of the storytelling. But I think maybe there's something about one-take films that work much better, perhaps, with just one point of view or following one story. Because, often in Medusa, we have to get from one location to another, and we just suddenly follow one character and move with them. And it sometimes just pulls you a bit out of that particular moment. Then you have to get into the next story with this new character you're following.
You've nailed it, babe. I hadn't thought of that, but that's definitely it. Is that every time we move from one character to another, when we follow them around a corridor and they start talking to someone else, you just have this lag, this moment of where everything gets slowed down. And given that it's meant to be kind of a exciting murder mystery whodunit thing, that lack of pacing, I think, is a bit of a problem.
Yeah, because suddenly when people are just walking around, I mean, which I'm sure they would do on a murder scene, but because we're watching a murder mystery, just seeing people kind of walk around from one place quite calmly, they got stuff to do, just doesn't have the energy of a murder mystery. Whereas if we we could cut quickly from one location to another location, we could give that sense of urgency of where's the murderer by cutting it that way. Whereas here, that kind of leisurely camera move, just, yeah.
Yeah. Though I kept thinking, like, where are the police? They've been waiting around for hours. What are the police up to? What's going on?
One thing I would like to say about Medusa Deluxe is it was clearly heavily influenced by one of my favourite failure films, which is One from the Heart. The neon-drenched, saturated colours, a direct riff on that. But also with One from the Heart, that's the film that isn't a one-take film.
Ford Coppola.
Yeah,
We're going to have to do it soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on re-release at the moment, I think. And so that film is a film that isn't one take, but it's made up of lots and lots of sustained, longer takes. So the whole film is sequences that might last a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, so they're all stitched together. So it has that feeling. And even the way the camera moves, it's clearly an influence on Medusa Deluxe. Especially there's a shot that kind of pulls out to reveal the entire of the location that they're in, and then it pushes in and flies into a window to pick up one of the characters. And that to me was almost identical from certain sequences within One from the Heart. So it was nice to see. I don't know, I wasn't expecting that, a riff on that film.
And I think you mentioned to me that we should also do an episode on movies with just long takes rather than one take, because I bloody love a long take. I love it when, especially when it comes, you know, kind of thinking about movies like Richard Linklater's Before Sunset trilogy. These long takes where two characters are just talking. I love that shit. I just eat it right up. It's so good. It's so good. So and it's like you get the best of both worlds. You get to really hold with the character and be with them, and it feel quite intimate. And I don't know, it does something very special. But also we do get the freedom of and the pacing of a cut. So yeah, we need to talk about that another time. But let us finish by talking about Victoria, because this is one of my favorite films of all time. Not just, I think, the best one take movie that's been made. It's a bold statement, but Russian Ark is incredible. But I think Victoria, in terms of marrying the story and storytelling with this impressive technique, I guess, it nails it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. Victoria was my favorite of the three, and my first time watching Victoria. I'd heard about it probably since release, but for some reason just never quite got round to it. And same with all three of these films, actually. They're films because I'll be honest, I've never watched Russian Ark because I thought it would be like it was, which is it's an incredible marvel to watch, but I just thought it's probably going to be a bit distancing. And
it does feel like a museum advert.
Yeah, but it's
I'm
still
glad
a marvel.
I watched it, but I'm never going to watch it again, that's for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I thought. I thought it'd be something to marvel at rather than something to fully be like, that was an incredible film. But Victoria, yeah, you're absolutely right, because what they managed to nail so well are the characters and the kind of just what you've got is a one-take film that doesn't feel like a technical exercise. And that is the genius of it.
And that exactly, because all these other films, you are so aware of the fact that it's a one-take movie. And in that sense, arguably, it does feel a little bit gimmicky, I guess. But with Victoria, it really doesn't feel that way. Just to give you a quick plot summary if you haven't seen it, though, I don't want to say too much, because the first time I watched it, I knew nothing. And speaking of Richard Linklater, the way the film begins, you meet Victoria, who's played by Leia Costa, a Spanish woman you meet her in Berlin in a club. And you quite quickly can tell that she's quite lonely. She's trying to make connections. And then this guy starts speaking to her. Sonny, yeah. Sorry, my German pronunciation terrible, obviously. Played by Frederick Lau. She kind of falls in with his gang. There are like 4 guys who are out on a night out, real Berliners, as they keep saying. Initially, it does feel like a kind of Before Sunset type of movie, and you kind of think it's just going to be that. And I was very happy with that, because, you get to know Victoria, you get to know these guys.
Yeah.
It's so naturalistic. The way the camera follows them, you're really not thinking, gosh, this camera there's not been any cuts. You're just with it and with them, and it feels very intimate, and you can feel the fact that they're all a little bit lost in their different ways. But then it goes in a completely surprising, crazy direction and becomes a very, very different kind of film by the end of the film. And the whole time, it's so exciting. It's like the energy of the fact that the film never cuts and the fact that they're trying to get it all in one take, that infuses the acting and the performances of everyone. And it becomes so heightened.
You absolutely feel like you are in the middle of it. You feel like you are right there with Victoria.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, unfortunately, I did know the gist of it, which I really wish I didn't. But that also has its own different thing, because it's that Hitchcock thing of surprise and suspense. If you know what's coming up, it's excruciating.
Yeah, does add suspense. I mean, there is this tension from the beginning, but the tension is you're thinking, are these guys good or bad? You get the sense of like, are they nice guys or are they?
They're wrong'uns. They're wrong'uns. Because I have to say, I found this film. I love this film. It's great. It is a classic. But I found it excruciating to watch because it nails Berlin. It gets the atmosphere of that night out in Berlin. that energy
Totally.
that you could leave at 4 a.m. and anything can happen. Now, I've had overwhelmingly positive, great experiences where I've had like random scripts, but but I was watching this thinking, oh, Victoria, come on, they're wrong-uns, Victoria, don't do it.
But it's brilliant, that bit where she is in the cafe with Sonny, and she plays piano and she tells him a bit of her backstory. And so you get this understanding that, oh, she's had this very controlled life and there was a plan, and now that plan is over and she's kind of looking for something. It kind of then makes sense as to why she follows completely a fucking crazy path. And you are thinking, I was like, why on earth would she do this? It seems so clear that this is going to lead nowhere good, but she goes all in. And because you get this quieter moment where she kind of shares a bit about herself, it doesn't feel implausible. That's what's amazing. This film goes crazy, and yet it all feels completely real and authentic, which is such a feat,
Because the first hour almost the first hour is a character study. It's a character piece. It's very gentle. That's your contrast as to what happens later. But yeah, I absolutely loved it because they cracked it being a one take, but also being a compelling story with characters you really care about and connect with. It doesn't feel this distancing exercise. And then little details like the fact that it was recorded with boom microphones as much as possible, so the dialogue just feels like it's in those environments. And also, I loved the fact that you've got main characters Spanish, the other guys are German, so they speak in English, the common language, which means that none of them are particularly native. Well, they're not fluent English speakers. They're not immaculate. So it means that any flubs and fuck ups, because they often say the wrong word or the wrong line, you don't even think about it being a mistake that they've made. It just sounds like, oh, they used the wrong word because they're having problems translating. Like, for example, he goes into the cafe and goes, oh, nice hotel you've got here. And it's because obviously they're going to a hotel later in the film. And he laughs and corrects himself. I mean, cafe, but you don't buy it as though he said he messed up. He's just like, he got his English a bit wrong.
Well, I think what helped with that hugely is the fact that there was basically a skeleton script. They improv'd throughout. And so it does feel totally naturalistic. And I also noticed that moment and loved it because it feels completely true to life when people mess up when they're trying to speak, but you also know that this is an actor trying to deliver a line. I don't know, that all adds to it. It's so fun. Because you've got these two things going on. You're really in the film and invested in the characters, but you're also thinking about it as this incredible performance and this tension of because apparently also the way that they filmed it was they initially did a kind of a safe run, right, where they filmed it in parts. I think you said it's 10-minute parts, sections, right? Just to make sure that basically for their financial backers, that they could tell them like, yeah, don't worry, we've got the movie. But then after that, they did 3 takes, and the first take, it went kind of technically correctly, but there was no energy, and the director, Sebastian Skiffer, was not happy with it. So then he started to get really, really stressed and literally starts like yelling at the crew and the cast to like, come on, no, we need more energy. This needs to be like, there's no life in this. You've got to bring it. And so then in the second take, apparently they went too far and were utterly bonkers, and it was way too much. So then the pressure starts to mount because it's like, oh my God, we've only got a few hours left to get this movie right. So he's like getting really, really stressed. And like apparently one of the cast members, they have like a proper huge fight, and it's like really tense between them. He didn't disclose which one, but I have my theory. I'm not saying it's this one, but actually on a side note, Franz Rogowski plays Boxer, this like main character. You'll know him from what's that film that you didn't like but I loved? The threesome film. What was it called?
The threesome. Oh my God, it's him, isn't it? Yeah. Passengers. Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Passengers. Yes, you'll know him from Passengers.
I did think I recognised, right.
Yes,
yeah,
and he's also in Great Freedom, which is one of my favourite movies of the last few years. It's a really incredible movie. So he's a fantastic actor, and he's really good in this. He's so good at playing a scary guy that you can't really trust. But anyway, that all aside, that final third take, they nailed it. And they filmed between, I think it was 4:30 and 7. And so it starts at night. And then as the film progresses, the sun comes out, and it's like sort of dawn by the time the film finishes, which again is just so incredible. The look of the film.
It's so good. And because it is happening real time, there's been no cheat. So you're never pulled out of it. You're never like, oh, that doesn't seem like the right time of day, or that must have been a different day that they shot that bit. Even if you're not aware, you subconsciously be aware, but this is all actually happening, and
Totally.
and then the sound effects, even the little bird tweeting as it's kind of morning time. They've just nailed what it's like to go out and have a wild night in Berlin, but then they've made it into this horror story, kind of terrifying horror story, which isn't actually what happens in Berlin most of the time. But it's almost like, oh God, that could have been me.
Yeah, totally. The other thing I really wanted to point out is that they don't have editing to tell the story. So they use other things to do it. And one of the things is the use of music. So there are 2 points in the film where music comes in over, and there's a scene where they're dancing in the club. They return to the club and they dance. There's an earlier moment as well. I forget where it is. Is it going up onto the roof?
Yeah, no. So when they're going into the lift to go onto the roof.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there are these moments where the dialogue is quietened down. You can hear it faintly, but mainly it's just this kind of score coming in, and it just gives us kind of breath and pause, and it kind of feels very emotional, and you just have this like moment to like process where we've got to in the film and everything that's come so far. And I feel like it's a great way of adding some pacing to the movie, because it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's a long movie, and it's going at such speed through all these different scenes despite there not being any cuts. So it's great to have those points, I think, in between what is actually quite a plot heavy movie in the end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They managed to get the pacing right. I mean, this is where they did clearly the calls that they made as far as where they can slow things down and how you slow it down. They really nailed it. I mean, and it's just so impressive, because the Russian Ark is incredible, but I hate saying but, it's not really a but there's something about the fact that it's all set in one place in a museum that just...
The same with Medusa Deluxe as well. I felt like, it feels a bit almost claustrophobic and a bit tiring to basically just be in the one place.
But Victoria just goes all over. It goes into clubs, into cafes and rooms, and just into cars and out of cars and
parks. I don't want to say any more, but various different places. Yeah, you're right. I just don't know how he did it. It's so incredible.
It's very, very impressive work. And I have to say, shout out to the cinematographer. Oh my God, it's a Norwegian cinematographer. I should have checked with Bjorn on the pronunciation here. Sturla Brandt Grovlen. Sorry about that. Anyway, Grovlen. It's got a little dash through his O. Anyway, but he was a cinematographer, and oh my God, like you've got to think he was working non-stop. I mean, he didn't have Steadicam. He was doing it handheld. The other two are on Steadicam or on tracks. This handheld camera, and to begin with, he had the director kept saying to him, "No, you've not got to be preempting what's happening. You've got to think like a war photographer. You've got to be reacting to what's happening around you." So that was the thing that he was being told by his director, was like, be in the moment. Even though we've done it loads of times, you've got to just completely be seeing it all fresh. And he also did something similar with the actors' improvisations. He said, look, we're doing 3 versions, we're doing 3 takes in total. But what I don't want you to do is to remember all your greatest hits from the previous takes, like that really funny line or that zinger, because you've got to forget all that. It's got to be new each time, which again, pretty hard to do. One of his rules of improvisation said, I don't want you to say the same story or the same thing over and over again. Everything's got to be new every time you come back to it.
God, I would actually I'd love to have a release of the first 2 takes. Just have a quick look at out of interest. Yeah. I want to see that crazy take.
I know, because it gets pretty crazy in this take, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I can only imagine how crazy that second take was. Yeah, honestly, it's such a great movie. I strongly, strongly recommend. And I'm so glad we've talked about one take movies this episode as a reason to talk about Victoria, because I think it is just an incredible, incredible movie.
It's an incredible film. Yeah, I absolutely loved watching that one. It got me so excited. And also just to point out, it is now officially the longest single take film in the history of cinema.
Round of applause for Victoria.
I mean, that's quite the achievement. For 2 hours, for over 2 hours,
2 hours 20 minutes. It's bonkers. It's totally bonkers that it would go on that long. And normally I complain about a long movie, but in this case, I think bravo. That's all good. Okay, so shall we take a trip to the film pharmacy?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have this entry. I just read an article about Scorsese's 10 worst films, and it got me thinking, is there a director with a flawless back catalogue? And if so, should I watch it from start to finish? I will say that
Ooh.
I then did a cursory Google and I found said articles. I believe it was an article in Far Out, which I must say is a very good website for articles about movies. I often use their resources. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes. But yeah, James, what do you think? Is there a director with a flawless back catalogue?
I mean, obviously, I can't even say the director who first comes to mind. I'm not going to. I'm not going to. Anyway,
Go
but
on. No, you can.
I'm not going to. Like,
What
if you're
if
a
we
fan
have
of the,
we might have a first-time listener?
well, I
with
would
us?
say, yeah, but what I want to do is reward long-time listeners because they'll get the joke, and then
Okay, fine.
incentivize newbies to go and discover the which director that would be. But the point is, my knowledge of films has its limits, and I just don't think I know enough about enough directors' full catalogue. However, what I would say is you can have a lot of fun just picking a director you like and just watching all their films in chronological order. So, for example, about 12 years ago, myself and a friend, every Sunday we met up and we'd watch every film that Francis Ford Coppola directed from the very first one. His very first film is a Roger Corman black and white horror film called Dementia 13 that was shot in the Republic of Ireland in 6 days or something like that. And it's mad. And then you watch his career progress, and he does a musical with Tommy Steele called Finian's Rainbow. And it's like, what do you do? What's happening, Francis? And that's where he met George Lucas on the set of that. So anyway, I would strongly Francis Ford Coppola's films in order is good fun.
It is good fun, but it certainly is not a flawless back catalogue. And I think
No,
that's what
sorry.
makes him so great. And the same with Scorsese. I think that actually what makes a great director is not a flawless back catalogue, but is someone who takes risks and has variation in their oeuvre. So I applaud them. But I actually, having said that, one of my favourite directors, I would argue, does pretty much have a flawless back catalogue, which is Paul Thomas Anderson. And I think the secret to success is he's only made 9 movies in his career. So little but do them well, I think is the secret to success. Because I mean, just to run through them: Boogie Nights, Magnolia, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Phantom Thread, Licorice Pizza most recently. I mean, some of those movies are my all-time favorites. And there's a consensus amongst critics that these are great movies. So I do think he is a good example. But other than that, it's like, just go for a few. Like I was thinking Rose Glass. Excellent, pristine back catalogue. She's only made 2 movies.
I think you're quite right. I think Paul Thomas Anderson is a great suggestion for a flawless back catalogue. But I almost think you'll have fun because each film is a classic in its own right. But is it going to be as entertaining as watching like a roller coaster director? Like I think Francis Ford Coppola, you get the highs and the lows,
What is amazing is a really genius director being given the bandwidth, the long lead to make huge. What were you calling them when we were discussing an episode on flops?
Follies.
Yeah, fantastic follies. It was something along this lines.
Anyway,
great follies, like really going for it and kind of failing hard. And I think in this day and age, it's tough for new directors to come up and be given that, and also for women directors. These are all. Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese are considered 2 of the greats. And they have some terrible, terrible movies in the back catalogue. And I just don't think there are any women directors who would be put in the same league as them if they'd had these kind of bombs. And we have to let people have some bombs in amongst the huge successes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I just got on a soapbox then, but I just suddenly got very impassioned about the whole thing.
I completely agree with you.
I believe in failure. It was very Elizabeth Day of me, We've got to be allowed to fail, guys. That is how we learn. And you're right, it's entertaining as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you do work your way through Coppola's back catalogue, by the time you finished his last film, Twixt, you'll be ready and up and running for Megalopolis.
Exactly, yeah. I was thinking that. We've got a movie that could potentially be another great flop, or it could be an absolute smash. Who knows? A complete triumph. I can't wait to see it to find out.
Yeah.
Well, this is making me feel inspired to do another kind of flops episode. So I think we should do that because it's time. I want to see After Hours. I want to see One from the Heart.
Come on, let's do it.
Okay, great. All right. Well, On that note, thank you guys for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
Thank you as always, and if you could find your way to leaving us a 5-star review or give us a like, it all helps get the podcast out to a bigger audience. Bye!
Follow us on Instagram at Groovy Movies Pod or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
Groovy Movies was produced and edited by Lily Austin.
Music and sound by James Brailsford.
Our logo was designed by Abby Jo Sheldon.
For references and more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.